This podcast is sponsored by the Music Player Network at musicplayer.com, the premier musician resource for keyboard players and beyond. Since the year 2000, the Music Player Network has been the go-to source for news and views on music technology, playing tips, and gigging help. The Keyboard Corner is one of the longest-running keyboard forums in internet history, with guitar, bass, drum, and numerous recording and music tech forums also on offer. Frequented by weekend warriors, manufacturers' representatives, and professionals alike, MPN provides an invaluable resource for any musician, and it's 100% free to sign up and use. Go to www.musicplayer.com to see for yourself.
Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the Keyboard Chronicles, a podcast for keyboard players of the gigging variety. I'm your host David Holloway and it's great to be back with you again. Our guest this episode is Dave Bryce, a musician voiceover artist that you've just heard on the ad before the show and owner of musicplayer.com. He's from California, USA, and musicplayer.com, as you heard in the ad, is a site that contains a preeminent forum for keyboard players called the Keyboard Corner. I've had the pleasure of knowing Dave online, at least, for coming up to 20 years, and over that time have admired his work both online and with a range of bands as a keyboard player. This is a guy who knows his stuff, as you'll hear, and I'm just a bit excited to pick his brains on everything keyboards and gigging. So here we go. I hope you enjoy it. Dave Bryce, thanks so much for joining us. This is a bit of a thrill for me.
A pleasure for me as well, brother Dave. Thank you so much for having me here.
So for our listeners either that do know Dave or don't, I've had the pleasure of knowing Dave for about 20 years, as I explained in my intro, but this is the first time we've actually spoken. So I'm one of those old nerds from pre-internet days that still gets excited by this stuff. So yeah, it's lovely to chat.
No, it's a beautiful thing. It's very cool when you can connect with somebody in real time that you've been gotten to know on a forum or on the computer. It's a whole different way of knowing someone. And usually when you hear someone's voice, you find that you never really read their words exactly the same way either. You know what I mean? Right. You can hear their voice. It takes on their attitude. It's like, oh, and then you go back and read old stuff. It's like, oh, yeah, sure, I get it.
I did debate when we first started chatting, putting on that even more traditional Australian accent as far as, how you going, mate? But I thought about it.
Hey, you going, mate? All right. Walking all Dundee, all right?
So no, it's great. Well, before we get onto the keyboard playing stuff, which is obviously the focus of this podcast, let's talk a bit about musicplayer.com. So that's certainly where I got involved way back in 2000. But I thought it'd be interesting to get a bit of insight on how the Keyboard Corner started and how you got involved in it from that beginning.
Oh, sure. This is back pre-music player history is in order. Mid-90s, I was working for Alesis. I was running their keyboard department. This is back when the Quadrasynth and QS series came out, right? And I was in charge of that in the marketing side at the time. And everybody was all hip to this new online thing called AOL, America Online. And you're right, it was a big deal.
Yeah.
And on it was access to a discussion group called Sound, Stage, and Studio, which was run by Craig Anderton, who is kind of a guru in our industry, right? And I kind of became a member of Sound, Stage, and Studio. It was fun to chat with other musicians. It was fun it was like the next evolution of what used to be listserv communications, where you would sign up for an email list, and then everybody would all get the same email. Right. So then this is a sort of a way of discussing, in real time on the internet, things that were of interest to you. And Soundstage and Studio cooked along for a little while. Alesis actually, it's interesting because people would ask questions about Alesis, and I would answer them. And some of the folks at Alesis were like, "I can't believe you're answering these." And I was like, "You don't understand. It's a good thing. Watch people's reaction." And they were all like, "Oh, thank you. So it's a bug. Something's wrong in the product. It's not me." And then we could fix it. It was a new way of supporting customers as well that came out of it. It was really cool. We could talk directly to the people who we're trying to build gear for. Anyway, America Online got greedy. I don't remember exactly the details, but they told all the forums, these little discussion forums, to get lost. And Craig at that point went to see the organization called CMP. I don't remember what the initials stand for. Sorry. That owned Guitar Player magazine, Bass Player magazine, Keyboard magazine, EQ at the time, and pitched them on starting on this concept, this musicplayer.com concept. It really came from Craig, exactly. At that point, it's just this new way of reaching to people and communicating with people in bidirectionally, and the CMP folks liked the idea, gave Craig the free rein to do it. To set it up. And this is like 1999 that this discussions happened. And Music Player launched in October, I think, of 99, maybe, or in 2000. I forget exactly when. That was right around the time that my tenure at Alesis was ending. And I remember running into Craig at a trade show. It was the AES show in Los Angeles. And we discussed what he was doing and what I was doing, and one thing led to another. And he was giving out the forums. And he says, you should have keyboard magazines for him. Guitar Player is going to have one. Bass Player is going to have one. George Massenberg is going to have one. Well-known mixer, and Roger Nichols, who used to do Steely Dan, and you should have keyboard magazines. And my little head went boom. Yeah. I'm like, seriously? That's like amazing. The idea that Craig would pick me for something like that was a really, really great honor. And I started the Keyboard Corner October, I think, of 2000, with a little post going, "Hi."
Yeah. And that does sound about right. And I mean, it's obviously gone from strength to strength. And probably one key point I want to make here for our listeners, you will have heard an advertisement for musicplayer.com, and I appreciate musicplayer.com being a founding sponsor of the podcast. But this is far from a superficial, let's talk to our sponsor. It's nothing like that, actually, because there is this 20 years of history. And I'd argue, aside from a couple of other forums that are still around, although less time than Keyboard Corner, this is one of the most substantive information databases or history of keyboard playing in the world. I mean, it may not be the easiest to find at times, although there's been a lot of improvements in that, but this is one substantial body of information.
There's no doubt about it. And we've been incredibly lucky over the years, especially considering some of the obstacles that we've come across, to have been able to preserve it. To the point that, and actually, knock on wood, nothing can happen to it. It was actually in danger a couple of different times of being completely and totally lost. And the circumstances were really quite interesting, and led us to a very, very favorable outcome as far as being able to make sure the forum stays alive for a while.
Absolutely. And so do encourage people. It's not just because you're an advertiser, musicplayer.com. It's because it's a bloody good resource. And it's probably one of the first things. I know a lot of younger people will go, well, the first thing I do when I wake up is I get on whatever social media, TikTok through to Instagram, Facebook. Well, mine is pretty much get up in the morning and got to check out what's going on Keyboard Corner.
I can't tell you how many times I've heard that, Dave, from how many people. Honestly, I've been involved in so many different things over the years. I'm a little ADD, and I can't sit still real well. I have to be doing 2, 3, 4 things at once. And this is one of the longest running things that I've ever done. And it is without a doubt one of my absolute favorite. What a privilege and a pleasure to have been involved in just starting and watching and being having a front row seat to watching this wonderful community of people grow and change over the years, and help each other and inform each other, and the whole time building up this wonderful database that you're talking about, and also in a very nice, real civil way, and which is a very important thing about our community. As we've been friends for 20 years, like you said, it's self-policing. Everybody's real committed to keeping the spirit of civility alive, which is a thing. It's a danger in a lot of internet communities. There's guys who can hide behind the anonymity of the computer screen, and they think they're in some kind of a video game or something, assassinating mini bosses. And that doesn't happen too often in our community. And when it does, it gets cleaned up pretty quick, and the people are either not encouraged to stay around if that's why they came, or end up like realizing what a resource they've come across and joining the community frequently.
Exactly. And you're actually responsible over the last 20 years for one of my biggest regrets in life, and through no fault of your own. So I'm going
What's
back
that?
probably 10 years in that when you were working for another manufacturer, and I basically organised with you to get a Dave Smith Instrument Polyevolver keyboard.
Right.
Loved it to bits, stupidly about 3 years, sold it, and have regretted it ever since.
It was one of the finest things that Dave ever did. I hate to tell you this. If you count the Polyevolver rack as one, I still have 3 of those.
Yeah, I'm jealous. Yeah, so
You should be. I like it a lot. Although, here, you want to hear a terrible thing? I had serial number 0001 of the Polyevolver keyboard. And at one point in time, it started like messing up on me a little bit. It was just being a little on the fritz. And I call up the DSI folks, and I'm like, hey, we'll take care of you. Sure, no problem. They send me down boards. I open it up. It was one of the first ones. It wasn't a production model. It had been hand built by Dave, and the thing had all kinds of cuts and jumps and connectors that were incompatible with the production boards. So they were very nice. They said, send it back up, and we'll totally take care of it. And they did. They completely took care of it and fixed it up. And in the process, they rebuilt the whole thing and took away the serial number. The 0001 serial number, because they had to put in a different button.
I was going to say, if you had it to do over again, would you have held on to the faulty unit?
No. Actually, I do have that. I have one of my 2 Andromedas from Alesis, including the original one that we had in the theater the first time we showed it, and it doesn't function very well. Won't pass the boot screen, but I'm not letting anybody near that one.
No.
That one doesn't even have a serial number. It was the first red one that we made, and what's it called? That's the exact opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
It's like I've a couple of times, and this I didn't even know when I sent it away. But if I had known, I would have made. Promise me that you have to preserve. I mean, this 0001, it was hand built by Dave. Oh, my heart.
Yeah.
But I'm never going to sell it. So at the end of the day, its value really doesn't matter. I still know what it is.
Yeah.
That's only real. It's like, what's your house worth? It's worth precisely one house until you sell it.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, let's segue in a little bit to your keyboard playing. So, I mean, you mentioned that Craig Anderson asked you to take on the forum. Now, the reason he would have done that is not just because of your industry experience, but because you are a well-known keyboard player, particularly in the LA area. So I was just interested in a potted history of your life as a keyboard player, where you started out, and what you're currently doing with keyboard playing at the broader level.
I appreciate that. It actually really is more of my industry thing, but not from the manufacturer side. I've spent so much time in the musical instrument professional audio industry, and there's 2 kinds of people in our industry. There's the people who like the gear because they want to be near musicians, and there are the people who are in this industry because we're just addicted to gear and addicted to music and addicted to the people, and they're 2 very different conversations that happen in my industry as a result of that dichotomy. And that's what got me into this. Was going to a music store to buy a keyboard, and I can have a job doing this. I can meet all the musicians doing this. I was successful at it because I am the customer, right? And all of my demos were always showing the things off me playing, not letting anybody else play. It was me doing it. And Kurzweil picked me up out of a music store in Boston to do that, to sit in front of Ray Kurzweil while he talked, and I would play the thing. And Alesis picked me up to do that, send me around the world playing and stuff like that. So actually, a lot of my notoriety, for lack of a better word, as a keyboard player does come from my industry thing, because I have been all over the world touring and playing. I went at one point in time when I was doing the Alesis thing and took Nick DeVirgilio, who was the drummer for Spock's Beard at the time. And we were coming out with a DM Pro kit at Alesis, and he and I just traveled all over the place just playing. And it was like that. Now, don't get me wrong, I do play with a couple of different bands in Los Angeles. But most of the time I spend time doing recording stuff. And once again, because of the musical industry, I have access to some of the most wonderful people. Matt Bissonette, who currently plays bass with Elton John. I was in a band with called the Police Cars. We were doing Police and Cars covers, and this is before he got the Elton gig. Right after he was doing Rick Springfield, and he plays on all my records. I've been able to connect with people like Tim Pierce, the guitar god, through the industry. He plays on a bunch of my records.
Yeah.
John Ferraro, who plays drums, is out playing drums with Burt Bacharach now, plays on my records and comes up and sits in with my one of my bands for gigs here and there. So it's really it's more interconnected than just being somebody who was like out playing on the strip and in bands that had shots at record deals. I did more of that in Boston than I did in Los Angeles, but really, as I said, a lot of my keyboard playing stuff comes from touring around with the companies. I do currently play with one band. I'm down to just one in the Los Angeles area. That's actually, in a related story, made up of pretty much almost all people from the professional audio industry. The drummer owns Blue Microphones, runs Blue Microphones out here. The guitar player is a VP at Fender. The other guitar player and singer is a product manager at Strymon. So to say the least, we don't hurt for really good gear.
So I had no idea of the history of that. So that's brilliant. Yeah,
that's where we came across it. We've all known each other. Mark McWright, who's the singer in my band Rabbit Valet, I've known him since the Alesis days. Same with John Meyer, who's the president of Blue right now. I met him when I was at Alesis as well, and he's gone through TC Electronic and Blue and stuff like that. And Mark worked for Line 6. And so, see, that's the thing. There's, like I said, there's this set of people that folks don't know about in our industry that we're just here because we're gear addicts. And I'm famous for saying we're not here for the money, we're not here for the women, we're here for the cheap gear.
I like it. That's a great personal catchphrase.
Totally true as well. It's like that's what I found out when I went to work at Daddy's Boston. It was like this DX7 that everybody else was paying $2,000 and they had to wait. I could get it for a lot less, and I didn't have to wait.
Exactly. Well, and that probably is a good segue as far as obviously you had to start out somewhere. So do you remember what the first keyboard was you owned, and the memories of the first band that you were in?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. The first actual keyboard that was mine was a Roland RS-101. It was a divide down string synth. Oh, yeah. String 1, string 2, and brass, and no polyphony limitations. It was one of the first things that Roland actually did. Before that, they were a company called Ace Tone. And I actually when I bought my RS-101, which is 1976, tucked my parents into it, was more like it. What you call it? When I got the RS-101 in 76, I also got an Ace Tone amplifier for it, as I said, which is the company that Roland evolved from. At that point in time, that was the first one I owned, but that was in the second or third band. I've been in bands since I was in 6th grade, 7th grade, and playing on whatever was available, piano or anything I could bash on. I remember being in a band called Moonshine, and we had like a Farfisa something or other. I don't even know. But the Roland one was used in a band called Wisteria. We did like Genesis and Emerson, Lake and Palmer and Yes covers. Gosh. And I had that along with the string synth. I also ended up with a weirdly weird keyboard called a Moog CDX, Cordovox CDX, which is this double manual white, or look it up, Cordovox Moog CDX. It was this white thing, really futuristic looking, and it had 2 manual organ. And the top manual, there was a Radio Shack like Moog synthesizer built into it that coupled to the top manual. You could push a button so that you could hold a chord, and the top note would be a synthesizer, which for playing old cool. Genesis. Oh, it was really wonderful. It was completely serendipitous that I came across this thing. It was just fabulous for that. And there was a really good guitar player in the band, obviously, to be able to pull that stuff off. And we would do Jeff Beck stuff, and people would come to parties. I was living in Philadelphia area at the time. People would come to parties and just sit there and watch us. I remember the cops came and shut us down, and we said, "Can we do one more song?" And they said, "Yeah." So we did side 4 of Seconds Out. 20 minutes long. It was one song basically.
That's one of the more interesting earlier bands. It certainly beats my cover band playing John Cougar Mellencamp covers.
That was the first one. I don't know how we made it into this. Well, prog was really, really big in Philadelphia. It wasn't really big all over the United States. I went to Boston for college, and there was like no prog there. And in California, only like a little bit. But Philadelphia and the area around New Jersey and New York and stuff is really, really into progressive rock. I got started on that with my cousin. I had a cousin who was older than me, and she got me into prog rock. I was in 5th grade, I think, at the time, and she got me a copy of Pictures in an Exhibition and Tarkus.
Oh yeah.
And I was just done. I had already had a copy of Switched on Bach, so I knew about synthesizers. But once I saw Emerson, Lake and Palmer, just my life was over.
Yeah.
Had to do that.
Rightfully so. Yeah. And so, I mean, jumping ahead again to the great band that you mentioned that you're involved with at the moment. So what's the rig you use, not without getting too techie, but what's the rig you use in that band, and why do you use what you use? Because, I mean, without giving too much away, I've seen pictures of your home studio, and you certainly have a few things to choose from. So I'm just interested why you choose what you do for the current band you're in.
I'm a very big Kurzweil guy. I've been a Kurzweil guy for a long time. As I said, I went to work at a music store in Boston, and this was in the mid 80s, right when Kurzweil started.
Yeah.
And so I had the big black K250, the $12,000 one that Stevie Wonder had him do. I was the expert in Boston, which was their home store. So I ended up going from there. I had a brief stint touring with Miles Davis as a keyboard tech, which I went and did because I had the opportunity, frankly.
Absolutely.
And then when I came back, and there's some stories in there, but we won't go there. But after that, they pulled me into working for Kurzweil at the Waltham office, doing tech support and product development and things with that. And the thing is, Kurzweil is one of the only companies that their operating system since the 90s, the VAST system, hasn't really changed the way it operates. So even for the stuff that I had from my K2000 and the whole library that I had of all the diskettes that I had at the time, they're all in my current Kurzweil Forte. Except I don't have to load them anymore, which is really great. So Kurzweil has been a mainstay of my keyboard rig for a very, very long time. There was a K2000 in the rig for years and years, and a 2600 for a couple of years, and then I went to the PC series, PC 8 for a minute and a half. The PC 3 was in my rig forever and ever. And then I just replaced it with a Forte recently, which I just love to bits. A little 76 key version of the thing.
Oh yeah.
And it's just fabulous beyond belief. I can move on it pretty quick. It's still the deepest engine of ever. It's great for layers, splits. I can do Shine On You, Crazy Diamond, but all the sounds layered across the keyboards. To come in and out from the sound effects to the way the pads come in and are layered. And I'm just used to it at the end of the day.
That's right. Yeah.
That's the Kurzweil has almost always been I believe in having a weighted keyboard and a non-weighted keyboard as a rule. And the Kurzweil has almost always been my weighted keyboard. The K2000 being obviously the notable exception.
Yeah.
But man, it's terrible to try to play piano on that thing. And then usually I want something non-weighted, and it's gone from being, depending on the band. I mean, in the police cars, it was a Poly Evolver to be able to do all the car stuff. But typically I want another Rompler. Just for live stuff, I like having Romplers, especially if you have one that have other technologies.
Yeah.
And that's the VAST thing. It's the VAST thing at the end of the day, can do all of these different technologies and all these different approaches to synthesis. Consequently, I'm very attracted to and a very good big devotee of the Kronos.
Yes.
I like the M1 when it first came out. I still own an M1 rack. And basically, at the end of the day, the Kronos is an M1. It's a modern day super M1, mega M1 with an iPad grafted to it, basically.
That's right.
With 8 or 9 different, I forget, it's more than that, engines, each one being great. I was always a big fan of the Wave Station. That's in there. It's got analog modeling. That's in there. I don't really use it for piano sounds because that's the bread and butter stuff is more the Kurzweil, but then typically I'll use the CX3 engine on the Korg, which I like a little bit better than the Kurzweil KB3 engine because that's just it's in my weighted keyboard. My hand doesn't want to play organ on the weighted keyboard. But besides that, the Korg it approaches. The Korg tends to approach organ like the finished sound coming out of your speakers, not like the real actual Hammond. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Well, it's a differentiation. The Nord keyboards take and some of the other, a lot of the clone wheels take the former approach of trying to be a lot more like the organ. And I got a Hammond downstairs for that. I love my A100 to bits. I want, if I want to pull up Time of the Season or if I want to pull up Tarkus, I want it treated live. I want the with all the effects and stuff. And I find the Kronos is really, really good for that. Plus, it's got all the sliders on it that I can use as drawbars.
Absolutely. Yeah, look, I mean, I'm a Kronos owner and bought it at the worst possible time after losing a job and getting a small payout and going, yeah, of course I'll spend in Australian dollars over $5,000 on this keyboard, but I've never regretted it.
No, nor I. It's a wonderful piece of kit, and it's just the funny thing is for the first 2 years I had it, I just had it in the studio, and I would go out with an Elisa's Quadrasynth up top or a QS series up top of something on top of the Kurzweil, just my gigging keyboard, and I'm like, what the hell am I thinking? No, my Kronos can't come out. Jesus, bring the Kronos. You spent the money on the Kronos. Get a good case and bring the Kronos out with you. And that, it's just wonderful. I do make sure and have a good stereo sound system. I'm committed to stereo sound. I use Line 6 L2Ts. And I love them to absolute bits. I also have a backup QSC system that's it's not matched. I've got a K8 and a K12.
Okay.
And I tend to I have a very weird way of setting up stereo. I put one of them on a pole and one of them on a floor, sort of as a floor monitor behind me. It's an odd way of doing things, but it works very well. With the the QSC stuff, putting the little 10 up in the air, or the little 8 up in the air and the 12 on its side like a floor monitor back behind me. It's I'm sure you can visualize it from my description, but it saves the left, right, front, back, and it gives you a nice stereo image because it's top, bottom. And it projects out into the room really nicely. And nobody really ever taught me to do anything like that. I was just messing around with it.
That's right. And the old chestnut, never been tempted by in-ear monitors?
Nope.
Okay. And I mean, just for disclosure, neither had I until about a year ago, and then I've tried them, and they do take a bit of getting used to, but love them to bits now. But yeah, it's still like the more old school, having that set up like you've described, and you're feeling it as much as hearing it.
I should probably kick over to them. I mean, I'm multi-instrumental, and I like to play pretty much everything. I don't play drums on anything that I'm doing right now with the Rabbit Valet folks, but I do play some bass and some guitar, and I move around pretty good amount. Also, I'm not real quiet when I'm playing. I like to hear what's going on in the audience. I like to interact with the audience.
Yeah.
If you're just, I find it very off-putting when bands are aloof or don't communicate with the audience, and they're not, don't make it an immersive experience. And that honestly is one of my biggest fear with the IEMs.
Yeah, and you're probably already aware of this. They're obviously the ambient in-ear monitors, and that was my main concern as well. And so, I mean, I bought mine are West Tones, and they're the ambient ones that do let in a bit of your surroundings, so I can still hear, my band members in the audience to some extent. So love that sort of, it's a bit of a compromise, but it works quite well. But you're right, that's your biggest risk with them.
Funny thing is, I actually do have a set of West Tones, but they're just for listening to music, just headphones.
Yeah, there you go. Okay.
I was at a trade show. They were doing the fitting thing for the ears, and I was like, yeah, sure, why not?
And obviously gear aside, and I mean, you're a young man that's maybe just slightly over 40.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'm 58.
There you go. What over all those years of playing, what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned as a player? And particularly in relation to gigging, so not so much technique, but just what have you learned over the years that you still stick by now?
Nothing more valuable than listening.
Yeah.
Nothing more valuable than listening. There just isn't. I get in a band of people and they listen. There's just nothing better. And everybody's like, it comes down to job one is to sell yourself. If you're not having a good time, it doesn't matter. Right. The job two is the band has to be sold. I remember I was at a showcase with the guy. We were in New York City at CBGB's, record company industry people, and he was just a wreck. And I was like, threw him against the wall and said, Stu, it's like, dude, seriously, you got to get it together. Don't worry about them. Worry about us.
Yeah.
If we're having a good time, they'll come along. If we're not having a good time,
right.
It's just not going to matter. It's just not. You got to lock in with the band. Why are you here? You got to play for yourself because you love it. I heard Luciano Pavarotti once say he loves his voice so much he can't help but sing along with it.
That's a great quote.
He was actually talking about listening to himself, listening to recordings of himself. Yeah. But I remember watching the documentary, and he was in the car and he was listening to an 8-track tape of himself, and he's like sitting there singing along with himself, and it's like, yeah. But that's exactly it. Some of my favorite moments are when nobody's here.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not playing for anybody else. I play for me at the end of the day. It's the same reason I cook, because I know how I like the food.
That's right.
Right? So you sit and you play the piano. It's fun to take a song that you know the chord structure of it, and then just play it your own way. And you know, just to tickle your own bone. What happens if I slow that down and make a little salsa kick to it? You know, and when you're in a band of musicians who are able to pick up on that and move with that and rotate on that. I like to be in bands that do memory versions of songs rather than tribute versions, trying to get it exactly right. There was a band that already got it exactly right.
That's right.
If you do the memory version, so it's, you know, just going to use this as the framework, and then we're going to make this sucker our own. That's my kind of good time.
Yeah, no, some great lessons there. And obviously, you're the sort of guy that feels they can always learn. So what are some of the things you wish you could do better as a player that you don't feel that, if not mastered even, that you do well? What would you like to get even better at?
Read music.
Yeah. I second that motion.
No,
are you a sight reader?
No, God, no. Tab ruined my life, Dave.
Yeah.
I'm one of those people. I have hellacious ears. I can hear intervals. I can hear all that stuff, right? And I was already bad enough with sheet music when they were trying to teach me lessons that I would listen to recordings of it, you know, before going to the piano lessons, the classical stuff. I would get Van Cliburn or whoever it was trying to play through these pieces, and I would learn it that way more than the sheet music.
That's right.
And then I found tab, and tab ruined my life, or did, depending on how you look at it. Because I'm like, let me get this straight. I can read what chord that is, and as long as I know the song in my head, I just basically have to play drums on the piano.
That's right.
I show people that with the Fleetwood Mac song Dreams. Dreams is F to G, except for 4 measures in the middle, the solo break.
Yeah.
But it's F to G to F to G to F to G. It just doesn't change, right? And I explain to them, I can know that it just goes F to G, and now knowing the song in my head, I can play it, and I never play it the same way ever.
Right. Yeah.
So, you know, but at the same, I kind of really, I'm envious of the people who can pick up a piece of sheet music and read it. And then especially those suckers who are really badass, like you could turn it upside down and read it backwards and, like, you know, contrabass clef and stuff. I would love to have that.
And do you find that there's that ongoing debate, and it's not black and white, but I mean, some people will say those that can sight read don't necessarily have the feel, and then those that don't do have the feel. I mean, obviously you've come across players that can sight read and also have that feel.
Yeah, not many.
No, so there you go. So yeah, I've always been interested in whether that's a stereotype based in huge fact or just partial fact.
I imagine it's got to be partial, because you got to be able to hear. Once again, music has that advantage. But you know, it's amazing to me the guys who are not comfortable. All right, here's what thing we're going to play us. You know, we're going to do an E minor 7 to A7. They could do and go. You know, and there's guys that are just happy doing that all night long. I am one of those.
Yeah,
I will follow you. I will follow your changes. You can change keys. You can change grooves. I love that. I can sit and do that stuff all night long. There are people who are really uncomfortable with it. And I do find, as a rule, the people who can sight read and, you know, as I flip that stuff around, are not necessarily comfortable with it. No. But there's the guys who get so good, you know, your snarky puppy type of Frank Zappa type, where you're just speaking the language. And at that point, of course, you can do that.
That's right. Yeah. No, great insight. And the obvious one, inspiration. So which keyboard players inspire you?
It started with Emerson, as I said.
Yeah.
Well, I started with is really weird because, God, I'm sure like you, we had no choice. As long as I remember, I've been into music. I remember being 3, 4 years old and owning Mary Poppins and La Traviata and La Boheme and My Fair Lady, and then I heard the Beatles do "She Loves You." I was 4.
That's right.
And I was living on an army base with my dad at the time in Germany, and I went to see Help when it first came out.
Yeah.
66 or 7 or whatever it was, in the theater. I was so done, Dave. I was so I'm like, that I want to do that.
Yeah.
You know? And so, I mean, the Beatles were my biggest influence. Keyboard players, the first piano player I remember listening to was Van Cliburn as a kid.
Yep.
Keith Emerson was huge when I was a kid. Switched on Bach was major for me. Elton John was major for me.
Yeah.
John Lord, geez, Rick Wakeman is always one of my heroes. Martha Argerich, my life starts and ends with that woman. I think she is the most fabulous piano player in the entire world, the Lioness. I don't want to say everything she's ever recorded because she's been recording since the 60s.
Yeah.
But she is a huge influence on me. I can't play like her. I love listening to Art Tatum. I'm famous for saying it sounds like two people playing, it's probably Art Tatum. Yeah. I don't understand, how one can play like that and be that good. That's just terrifying. I don't play like that at all, but it's such a joy to listen to.
Yeah. No, some great inspirations there. And I mean, back on the tech front, I mean, obviously you still work in the industry actively. What's got you excited right now tech-wise, and what are you hoping for in the future?
This is not going to be a popular answer. What's got me excited for tech? Not a damn thing.
Yeah.
Seriously, not a damn thing. I'm all about write a better chorus. At the end of the day, these things. That's Craig Anderton's line. I have to give him credit for that. The gear doesn't make a difference. It really doesn't make a difference. There's a story about Eddie Van Halen doing a clinic in a store, and someone was like, what guitar did you use, and what this, and how do you wind your pickups? He goes, look, give me the cheapest guitar in the store. Yeah. And someone handed him a Hondo, and he plugged into a PV Audition 10 and started playing Eruption, and looked up and went, get it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm big into that. I never AB anything, I just, whether it works for me or it doesn't. And it's rare that a technology itself inspires me. Yeah. It's a lot of the time I'll see what they've done with it. I mean, I remember when the Morpheus came out, the EMU Morpheus. Oh, yeah. Right. Brilliant technologically. I followed what they were doing with the morphing and the 8 different layers and the, being able to modulate between them. And then I got the synth, and they hadn't really done anything interesting with it at all. Yeah. The Z1, another one that was way in front of people technologically. People didn't get it at all. The Wave Station, when it came out, and people were like, well, where's the piano sound in it? Right. They had Korg responded by putting a piano sound in it. The morons. Yeah. Not to bust Korg. I love the folks at Korg. Really, I do. As I said, I'm a Protos guy. Yeah. But what you call it? The technology. It's gotten to the point where who was I talking to? It was Mike Martin from Casio. Oh, yep. They've come out with this thing. Was the PXS 1000 or SXP 1000? I forget what it's called. I had the 3000 version of it, and this thing has got the best feeling 88 key weighted key bed. It's got hundreds of sounds. You can plug in an iPad and you have complete control over the thing. It's phenomenal looking in that there's not a button. It looks like an iPhone. The whole thing's black. There's only one button on it. You turn it up and the lights go on the panel, and the panel is touch sensitive. It's got a sound system on board that can go to surround. It's got speakers that come out the back, right? The thing, you can put 6 AA batteries into it and walk around with it. It weighs 30 pounds. This thing costs $799. Right. Yeah. And I'm talking to him at the Synthplex show in Los Angeles, and he says, yeah, we're having some trouble coming up with some new stuff. I'm like, what? Yeah. What? Where? Where can you go? We were already at the point where we can put huge samples in there, huge stereo samples, single shot stuff if you really want. You don't have to do any kind of looping or anything like that. They've already done the thing where it's some samples and some modeling or entire modeling, and they've branched out into all kinds of granular technologies and things like that, and people don't get it. They don't understand the practical application. They go, ooh, nice sound, but then they can't, apart from playing it in a music store, they can't really, they're going to, how often are you going to use it in your music? Not to mention the fact that the software thing has blown the limits off of everything physically. Right. So at the end of the day, for me, it's come back to what I do with it. And I'm spending more and more of my time learning to work with microphones, mic and a piano, and learning how to record stuff a little bit better and work on my craft in that respect, and try not to be dependent on the technology. And I don't want to be come off like a snob about it in that respect. It's just that I think that technologically we've run into a kind of a wall where it's really exceeded technologically what we're able to imagine we can do.
Agreed. I think it's definitely more evolution than revolution now, and even things, and we won't talk about it now, but things like that Osmo's keyboard, love the look of it. It is very different, but it's still what I would call a radical evolution rather than a revolution in the way that you'd play.
Sure. Look at this is one of the reasons. Also, the accessibility thing is why the synthesizer is now the primary music instrument of popular music, which some guitar guys don't like to hear, but it's really, really true. And anyone who like grumbles about that, I'm like, stop and think about this for a minute. For $4.99, you can have an app on your phone that gives you 4 tracks. One of them has all kinds of drum beats already programmed. One of them has synthesizer beats already programmed. You can sit there and tap things in, and then you can use your microphone, and you can be making music in 5 minutes when you had been making music before. Can you do that with a guitar? You cannot.
No, that's right.
So more people than ever have access to that stuff. A. B, if you look at what's hip right now, what's hip is not technology. What's hip is the Eurorack thing, modular, right? And that has nothing to do with the synthesizer, but with the playing side of it, not nothing, but not as much to do with it as the knob twirling thing and the sound tweaking thing.
That's right.
And over pattern-based stuff and working on that. And once again, doesn't require so much formal musical training. And also, that brings me to another one of my interesting definitions. You get people all the time go, are these people, do you consider them to be musicians? Because I call them more producers. Yeah. What's a musician and what's a producer? You want to know what my definition is? I have a really cool definition, I think. If I turn the electricity off and you can entertain me, you're a musician.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't care if you just bang on your leg and sing, without, and that's not looking down on the people who do the production stuff, because these folks do things that I can follow with my head, and I can't do it myself. I'm in admiration of the way they think, but that's production to me. It's like the V-synth isn't really a keyboard; it's a music production thing.
Yeah.
Same sort of thing. It's a different kind of a craft to me.
I like the electricity-based definition. I like that a lot.
Feel free to use it. Just footnote is all I ask, because that's one of my faves that I've come up with, because it's really true.
It is.
People grumble at me. I say, hey, listen, man, my game, my rules.
Exactly. And one question we ask all guests, and it's a bit of a cliche, but it's the old Desert Island Discs question. So, but what are the 5 albums? And I know albums are a bit out of fashion now, but what are the 5 albums that you couldn't live without? Is probably the best way to put it.
Bastard.
But I know it's hard.
Fine. Let's see. Oh, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road.
Yep.
Lamb Lies Down on Broadway.
Yep.
Help.
Yeah.
Gosh, so many. I would know. I was trying to think of one of the one of the ones from Martha Argerich, but at this point I don't have the records anymore. I just have them. I would pick something by Martha Argerich, one of her collections.
Yep. And one
to be sure. And gosh, last Led Zeppelin 4.
Oh, nice picks.
Well, it certainly shows you what era I grew up in. That's no Nirvana on my list, right?
No, that's right. Which, I'm on your side on that one. And just while we're talking about albums and CDs too, one thing that has evolved, but not necessarily for the better, is I know one of the things the Keyboard Corner used to do is we used to do the collaborative CDs where we'd all contribute a song, and I'm pretty sure it was you that had all the fun of trying to get them all onto CDs and posting them out.
Correct. And I have them all too.
Yeah, there you go. And you mentioned Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, and I'm paranoid. I'm showing my ignorance here, but Grey Seal is a song from that album, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And that was the first time, believe it or not, so we all have gaps in our music knowledge, and Goodbye Yellow Brick Road is one of mine. I had no idea of the existence of that song until I heard your version of it.
No.
And still is on my iTunes playlist today.
Oh, thank you very much. That's the one that we started up. I think I just put it on the record by itself, or did it have the first or fifth beginning to it?
No, it was just on it by itself, yeah.
Actually, if you look on my website, it has the piano intro for Firth of Fifth at the begining of it.
Oh, there you go.
And they go together surprisingly well. Interestingly enough, that the Grey Seal is three of the 5 members of Rabbit Valet, except we did it many, many years ago. We did that in 2004, and the drummer for Rabbit Valet is on it, John Meyer, and the singer is Mark McCrite.
There you go. I'd always assumed that it's you that had sung it. There you go. You've just shattered a myth of mine.
No, I almost always know people who can sing better than me, Dave. The only thing of mine that I've sung on that's actually gets any traction is I did a version of a Bruce Springsteen song called Thunder Road.
Yeah.
And his way of doing it live is he lets the piano player Roy Bataan just play it on the piano and he just sings along with it.
Yeah.
And on my third record, Gotcha Covered, I did that. It was like it took me 6 weeks to get up the guts, and I just set up a keyboard with a microphone and I just ran tape. You know what I mean? Ran tape.
Yeah.
Old guy.
Yeah,
goddammit.
absolutely.
I ran tape and just took a couple of takes of myself just singing and playing all the way through. And oddly enough, of all the stuff I've got online, that one, there are very few of them that I've got over 10,000 plays. That particular one is one of them. It's one of the top 5. And so, I don't know what that'll tell you.
Well,
it's one of the only times that I let myself sing on anything that's one of my records.
Yeah, well, you don't need to sing because you play. And I can't think of anything better to finish on than a Bruce Springsteen reference because I'm a rabid fan. So, Dave Bryce, thank you so much.
Dave Holloway, what a pleasure to talk to you, brother.
And there you have it. A huge thanks again to Dave Bryce for joining us on the show. I can't begin to thank Dave for both his stewardship of the Keyboard Corner over the last 20 or so years and now his stewardship of musicplayer.com more broadly. It's greatly appreciated. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with another interview. Our next guest also comes from the US and is a fascinating keyboard player who works in a range of genres, including some incredible work that he does as part of a band that supports US Armed Forces, both domestically and overseas, and also veterans who have served. I can't wait for you to hear his stories. Actually, it's a really good one. Also, just a reminder that you can keep in touch via a few means. Our website is www.keyboardchronicles.com. We are on Facebook at Keyboard Chronicles, and our Twitter account is thekeyboardchr1. If you'd like good old-fashioned email, then we're always keen to get an email from you at editor@keyboardchronicles.com. Just also a quick note as far as where to listen to this podcast, aside from your usual suspects as far as the website and iTunes, we are on platforms such as Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and so on. So do look for them there. But thanks so much again for listening, and I hope to see you back here next episode.